of folks that work day in and day out in the economic development area and workforce development. And I'd like to just set the tone and tell you who these folks are, and then we're going to ask them to present, react to each other, and then react with you. So it's no secret that there's a shortage of workers and that it's been a chronic problem throughout our region and throughout the state. Our workforce is aging and our population is stagnant. The Vermont Futures Project, which is a project of the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, calls it the supply gap. 3,500 high school grads each year, 4,500 college grads each year, add up to about 8,000 individuals. This is against an annual demand of 8,750, of which 11,375 are, like a lot of people in this room, close to retirement. So we're going to need, on average, 10,000 workers a year between now and 2040 if we're going to meet the demands of the economy. Last year, Vermont's reward program, which, by the way, initiated in the Senate Economic Development Committee, and Mike's maybe going to talk a little bit about that, drew international attention to our state by offering people who would move here and work remotely a reward of $10,000. If the investment that the legislature made in the program didn't pay off, the publicity certainly did, because it really put Vermont on the map as a destination for people who want to change and go to a new lifestyle and find a place to work. Not all were pleased with that, and Mike will probably tell you a little bit about what's happened in his committee on that. And just this last week, yesterday, Governor Scott called it a demographic crisis. In his State of the State address 2 weeks ago, he mentioned the demographic crisis. In his budget address yesterday, he mentioned the crisis and called for a series of new initiatives to attract workers to the state and build the workforce from within. So I'm happy to welcome our distinguished panel here this afternoon. In the middle is Lindsay Kurrle, who is no stranger to members of the Central Vermont Chamber. Lindsay's business was a former chamber member and business owner here in Central Vermont, and she is now the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. That agency has jurisdiction over economic development, housing, tourism, and workforce development. And this month, on its website, you can find out, they've announced two new initiatives. One is called the Choose Vermont Scholarship Program, and the other is called the Regional Marketing and Development Grants. Maybe Lindsay will tell you a little bit about that. Lindsay's particularly well qualified in workforce development because she served for 2 years as Commissioner of Labor. Prior to joining state government in 2017, she was the operations manager for Kurrle Fuels, and you remember out across from the Montpelier Country Club. She and her husband Jim recently sold that. She worked at the Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice. We all know her from there, and nobody knew until Governor Scott tapped her to be Secretary of Labor that Lindsay was actually a CPA. Because if you imagine a CPA is a banker with a sense of humor, right? Anybody who knew Lindsay from any of her prior roles would say, well, Lindsay doesn't seem to be a CPA, but she is one anyway. So Lindsay has been active in Chamber, Rotary, and other local affairs. To her right is Michael Marcotte. Michael is a Republican representative from Coventry, and he is chair of the House Commerce Committee. Michael is the owner and operator, with his wife, of Jimmy Quick Store in Newport. He also is very active in his community, in addition to his service in the legislature. He's been the chair of the Coventry Select Board. He's a former member of the Parish Council, served on the Knights of Columbus, officer in the Elks Club. The Discover Newport website says of Jimmy's Quick Stop, Mike and his wife are very kind people, and they treat customers with great respect. That's a great reputation to have in the community. And then to my immediate right is Michael Sirotkin. Mike is a Democrat from Chittenden County. He chairs the Senate Economic Development and General Affairs Committee. This committee is the one that initiated the Remote Workers Reward Program in 2018. Mike also serves as a member of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee has jurisdiction over taxing matters, utilities, and others. He's got a pretty good background in business policy. He's a graduate of the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, and he got his law degree at the University of Denver. Michael was a lawyer and lobbyist for many, many years in the State House. He was appointed to the Senate to replace his late wife, Sally Fox, after her untimely death in 2014. Each of these people has a role in leading state policy as we look to the workforce of the future, and I'm pleased to welcome them. So our format for this evening, each panelist will make a short opening statement about the work of his or her entity, their perspective on workforce development and the role of the private sector. Then we'll open it up to comments from the other panelists and questions from the audience after the three have made their opening remarks. And folks, what our folks mostly want to hear is what policies are in place now, what proposals are in play during the legislative session, and how can we as business owners get involved in the process. That said, I'd like to start with Lindsay Kurrle. Lindsay?
Perfect. I'm noticing that the senator and the representative don't have notes in front of them, so I aspire to be like them and shoot from the hip one day, but I am going to look at my notes. So good evening, and thank you everyone for having me here. I want to start off by thanking you all for the contributions that you've made to the Central Vermont community and the economy. As a small business owner and someone who grew up in Montpelier, I am acutely aware of how important our small businesses are to this region of our state, and it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you, so many familiar faces. As the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, I have the pleasure of traveling around the state with the governor and the rest of the cabinet members. From day one, when I started my role as the Commissioner of Labor and now in my new role as Secretary of Commerce, I was aware that the barriers for growth and meeting employment needs are the same in Barrie as they are in Newport. Our demographic challenges, the availability of skilled workers, access to safe and affordable housing, and municipal and state permitting are some of the most common barriers that I hear businesses talk about. I'm sure many of you in this room have heard it before and even felt it in your own business, but as Joe mentioned, Vermont is facing a demographic and workforce shortage with 15,000 less individuals in the workforce today than in 2009. It's also no secret that we have one of the oldest populations in the country, with 18% of our population over the age of 65. To attract new Vermonters and Vermont workers to the state, we've teamed up with the Department of Labor, and we're focusing on recruitment efforts, both in target marketing and in creating a system of concierge services for individuals who are interested in moving here. We've successfully relocated over 300 individuals and their families with our remote workers incentive, which Senator Sirotkin will share more on, I'm sure, and our Stay to Stay weekend, which is helping convert visitors to Vermont to residents. We have brought 12 families here to date since the inception of the program a year ago. On January 1st of this year, we announced the agency's new worker program, which is an extension of the remote worker program that will offer incentives to individuals who move to Vermont and also work here. Whereas the remote worker program was you moved to Vermont, but you worked remotely out of the state. Over the last 3 years, we've created a returnship program to assist mature and skilled workers to re-enter the workforce if they want to. We target individuals at retirement age, stay-at-home mothers and fathers, and individuals who have been out of the workforce in substance use recovery. When it comes to attracting and retaining businesses, I can assure you we're also doing everything we can with programs and the resources that we have, and knowing that we are never going to compete dollar for dollar with some of the larger states. However, you'll see the economic development team working to make the Vermont Economic Growth Incentive, which some of you may know as VEGI, more flexible and attractive for businesses, as well as advocating for the expansion of the Vermont Training Program. The governor announced yesterday in his budget address 2 incentive programs for small and large businesses. One will be used to incentivize large businesses to make significant capital investments in their Vermont locations. The other is a partnership between the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and the Vermont Economic Development Authority to support more small business growth by providing low-cost loans that convert to no-cost grants after meeting expansion and payroll goals. Both of these programs are an extension of the incentive economic development tools that we utilize currently, but our goal with these proposals is to make them more flexible and accessible to businesses of all sizes. The governor has also announced yesterday a significant investment in the state's marketing dollars, an increase of nearly $1 million for tourism and economic development marketing, as well as to market the outdoor rec economy. The agency's targeted marketing efforts to date have been incredibly successful, and we hope this additional investment will allow us to target new visitors and employers to our communities. I'm almost done. As we work through the details of these initiatives, it would be great to have your feedback and your support. Please don't hesitate to reach out to my office at any point. A lot of you have my personal number. And again, I would welcome your feedback on this. And I want to thank you all again. I look forward to, as I mentioned earlier, I enjoy sitting next to these two men. I spent a lot of time testifying across the table. So it's nice to share the table together with you both tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. You know it's a great state when you have the cell phone number of the Secretary of Commerce and Community Development, and she answers when you call. Mike Marcotte, let's go with you next. What's happening in the House Commerce Committee this year, and how are we going to solve this problem?
I was hoping you were going to tell me that, Joe. Well, I want to thank everyone for the invitation to be here and be at your annual meeting this year. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for what you do. You are a part of the economic engine for the state of Vermont, and you supply the jobs, and your tax dollars are helping run this state, so thank you for all you do. As Lindsay was outlining the governor's programs, we've already started. We started yesterday, right after the budget address. We had Commissioner Pelham in to talk about tourism and marketing, and we continued with that this morning and this afternoon. And I think, if you think about it, how does tourism and marketing go along with workforce? Well, we need to bring people into the state so that they see how we are, how we operate, what our places look like, what our businesses look like. And we're hoping that by bringing more people in, we'll get some of them to stay. That they'll want to be Vermonters, they'll want to participate in our economy, participate in our recreation activities, and help become good citizens of the state. Another thing the governor said yesterday also was that we need to be open for other people to come in, and we need to be open to accept refugees and immigration when those opportunities knock. We need people, doesn't matter where they come from, we need them here, and we need those bodies to fill our jobs, like I think all of you know that we need. We are also, next week, we'll be working on veggie and looking at the new proposals from the governor. The pilot project seems interesting to allow businesses to get upfront dollars when they're going to expand and put on more workers. And so I think some of what's been prohibitive with the regular veggie program is that you don't get paid until you performed. Here you get paid, it's a loan, and you pay on your loan, but once you've accomplished your goals, at that point, then it turns into a grant. So I think it looks like it'll be a win-win. We still don't know all the details yet. We are going to have people in testifying next week, but we're looking forward to working on that. And I just want to say that if any of you wish to testify into the committee, our doors are always open. We welcome people to come in and let us know their thoughts. You can email with your thoughts, or you can come testify in person. You can testify over the phone. So that's an open invitation for anyone to do that, and we really need to hear your input also. So thank you once again for inviting me to be here with you tonight.
Thank you, Mike. So they say the governor proposes and the legislature disposes, Michael Sirotkin. This governor is of a different party than you. You know, how was the dialogue under the Golden Dome between this governor and the Senate, who firmly control the Senate, and how are we going to solve these demographic problems?
Well, actually, I feel myself somewhat connected to the governor at the hip. He gave a speech the other day, and we were talking about remote workers a lot already, and he singled out my committee and myself in the speech, which was the only reference to legislators in the whole speech. So his support for this program has been critical, because I've gotten a lot of pushback on this program, and I want to talk about it because I want you to understand the backstory. And I've got mixed reviews from the business community and from others, but I want to tell you how we got there and the backstory on that. But before I do, I want to acknowledge my other panelists here, because Mike Marcotte is a genuine pleasure to work with. And there has been, I was a lobbyist for 30 years, and I've seen some real tension between the House and the Senate and economic development committees under other chairs. But I think I can safely say that Mike and I are upfront and honest with each other and are wanting to get to common goals. And Lindsay's a breath of fresh air, and she was in my committee this morning, and she's a pleasure to listen to all the time. So anyhow, Joe has mentioned the remote worker program, and it started in the very first day that I became chair of the committee. Kevin Mullen, who you may know was chair before, and he became the chair of the Green Mountain Care Board, and I got elevated to the position of chair of the Senate Economic Development Committee. And Michael Sirotkin, who was Lindsay's predecessor, was my very first witness. And I think it was my very first question to him. I said, in terms of economic development, what sets Vermont apart from other states, especially surrounding states? And I'm sure you can guess in some ways the answer. He said, quality of life. And then he said, and proximity to big metropolitan areas. And so testimony went on, and we had a bill in my committee that was sponsored by Senator Ginny Lyons, that her daughter was a remote worker who had come to Vermont and was working for a California company. And she had a bill in to reward people who did that. It took the form of a tax credit, and it took the form of a $200 tax credit. And I looked at that and I said, $200? You think someone's gonna come here for a $200 credit a year and a half from now? They won't even remember that they came and they could qualify. So we managed to raise that to $10,000. It seemed like a good idea, because the other thing we heard in committee over and over again was that people working remotely, because of the gig economy and the computer age and all of technology, was a growing way to work. So you put all those together, incentivizing people to come to the state seemed to make sense. So we pushed forward with that, and initially, it wasn't all that hard in the Senate, but the House hated it. It went down to the last night of the session to try and get it through, and we did it in a format where we got $500,000 to fund this program over a 2-year period. Mike has since come around, and he helped us, and I think it was a lot to do. The governor really thought this was a good idea and tied into his whole demographic crisis analysis. And in the second year, with the help of the House, we were able to consolidate some funds and move them forward, so that we now have, I think it's actually close to 400 new Vermonters here in 1 year of running the program. The average grant is about a little less than $4,000. And when you think about other kinds of economic development tools, the traditional, I don't want to say old school, but one of the things that also got me interested in this was there was a study by the Brookings Institute, which is a very respected policy institute, a think tank, that said there are two kinds of economic development. There's place-based, which is traditional, where you give money to corporations, and like what New York City was trying to do to get 26,000 workers to come to do the headquarters for Amazon in Long Island City, and that was going to be priced out at something like $50,000 a worker was going to cost them. And then there was what is called people-based, where instead of giving money directly to the corporations, you give money to the employees, and they take that money as an incentive to go work for a particular business. So they're both valid, but we hadn't done much in terms of the people-based incentives. So this program got launched, and the rest is sort of history. We got $7 million in earned media across the world on this program, and several jurisdictions have copied us since then because it is a tool to bring people here and to bring workers here. We've got two major criticisms to the program. One was from people who just stood back and said, I can't believe you're giving money to out-of-staters to come here. We have so many needs in the state of Vermont for our workers. Why are you giving $500,000 to out-of-state workers? Well, one of the answers is we give about $60 million to in-state workers in terms of workforce training. We have 50 or more programs to help Vermonters in terms of getting jobs and getting paired up and apprenticeships and all of that. So this was a very tiny pilot program for out-of-states. It was something new. The other issue that was raised was probably more by people like yourself, where they said, why can't we as Vermont businesses have our employees benefit from this money? So the governor last year doubled down in response to that criticism, and he put in twice as much money as the remote worker for a program that we now call relocated workers. So you as employers can say to your folks that you're trying to hire someone from out of state, if they come to work for you, there's a program in the state of Vermont that can help pay for their relocation costs, anything related to their employment, up to the tune of $7,500 in most of Vermont. And even though I'm from Chittenden County, I'm very sensitive of the fact that there are two Vermonts, Chittenden County and the rest of Vermont. So I only gave $5,000 to people in Chittenden County. But for the rest of the state, we gave $7,500. So, and I've had several employers come to me and say they weren't aware of this program and that they were going to start using it. And they're the biggest, the employer community is the biggest tool for recruiting people to this program. Because if they're trying to get anybody to come work for them from out of state, they can now say, you can get up to $7,500 reimbursed in your moving costs and other costs associated with your employment. So that's the backstory. I've talked long enough. I want to say the name of my committee is not just economic development. It's called Economic Development and Housing and General Affairs. And the other big thing that I'm willing to talk about, I want to talk about, is the housing problem we have in the state of Vermont, which we're laser focused on right now, because that also is an economic development issue, because we hear from employers statewide that they're having trouble finding people to work for them because the cost of living, especially the cost of housing, is too high. Thank you.
I hope that the panelists will delve into a little bit that housing issue and the cost of living issue, because it's not just a lack of bodies or education of the workforce, it's a multifaceted thing. And we would also welcome questions and comments from the audience. But I did want to follow up with Michael and others on the panel. The auditor of accounts, who doesn't like tax increment financing and doesn't like the Vermont Economic Growth Incentive Program, didn't like the remote worker program either. His complaints were, one, that it was giving money away to people who were going to come here anyway. That was one of them. And the other was that the program was poorly designed by the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So I would like our panelists to address those two issues.
Would you like me to start?
Let's go with Lindsay first.
If I start, I won't finish.
Okay, so you want me. So first of all, when the program was developed, which I think was brilliant, the idea was for this to be a catalyst to get somebody to make this move, right? People need a nudge. So the argument that somebody may have already been coming here, we don't know that for sure. But I think what the recommendation from the legislature to our agency and putting the program together was, don't complicate it, right? This is intended to get people's attention, to drive them here, and don't over plan or overcomplicate. So that's sort of my quick answer on this. But you know, again, we have a lot of great stories of. I can tell you actually, the day that the first national news story hit about this program, I was traveling to Washington D.C. On business, and the Uber driver, the minute he found out I was from Vermont, he said to me, I just heard about you on the news today. He said, my wife and I were both in the IT field, and he said, you know what? We already had a conversation. We'd like to move to Vermont. Now, I wish I could tell you they did, but I totally lost track. But my point is this, it really is, like, it's meant to be a catalyst. It's something to encourage people to really think about coming here. And as far as the way the program is administered in our agency, look, we didn't put gobs of money or resources behind administering it. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We feel good about the money that has gone out. And you know, I just would say that, you know, I think part of this comes down to, is this a policy concern he has, or truly is he really concerned about the delivery? And I will definitely punt to Senator Sirotkin on this one.
Well, so I'll start off by saying Doug Hoffer is a friend of mine, but we couldn't disagree more on this program. As the commissioner said, as the secretary said, sorry, you're
That's
elevated. Okay. As the secretary said, this was not to be designed as a program that was the be-all and end-all of why somebody moved here. It was one piece of many. It was to attract attention and potentially turn them, get them over the top to come here and to bring their attention. So his criticism that we have no evidence that they wouldn't have moved here anyhow, it may be valid, but that wasn't our intent. We wanted to get their attention and make them think about Vermont, and it worked. And the fact that he doesn't recognize that, and doesn't recognize the fact that he is part of the chorus that says we can spend the money in Vermont on Vermonters, it's not forward thinking in my mind. I mean, we have to do both. We have to do as much as we can to retain people in Vermont, and we have to attract people from out of state. And we do an incredible amount to keep people in Vermont. It's not unwise to put a little bit of money aside to try a new pilot project. I also had some problems, and we went at it pretty well in a committee hearing the other day, because he cited several examples of things where the program looked bad. Like somebody bought instead of buying a monitor, they bought a bigger monitor with a curve on it or something like that in terms of trying to work remotely. Or instead of using a satellite internet hookup, they did an underground cable for 100 feet in there. I mean, in my mind, he cherry-picked things that looked bad to the public, but were not representative of the program. And yes, when you start new ideas, you don't want to start burdening them down with a lot of bureaucratic red tape. So when the agency called me and said, what was the legislative intent, how should we start it? I say, make it as simple as possible and get the money out the door. It may not be perfect, but you're gonna lose the overall purpose if you drag people down in bureaucracy and paperwork and make them wait. And so I think we have a difference of opinion with the auditor.
I'm glad you missed that one.
So, as Senator said, my committee wasn't overly enthusiastic with the program. But we did recognize last year that there was value. Number one, we got about $7 million worth of free advertising out of it, which is huge. And it's worldwide. It wasn't just advertising in Vermont or New England. Also, I mean, when we were taking testimony on it, we heard that, yeah, there's going to be people that are already in the pipeline that are thinking about coming to Vermont or planning on coming to Vermont or moving here to work. But we don't know when that was going to happen. This, I think, was a catalyst for them to make up their mind. It's like, now's the time to come. It's a great time to come because we could get up to 10 grand to move here. And they're working remotely, but that doesn't mean that they're not available for other businesses in the state to work with. So it doesn't mean that they got to stay remotely. They could wind up being hired by another company in Vermont and working remotely within Vermont. So I agree with the senator that I think that the auditor may be overthinking this a little bit. That I think he did cherry pick some of the things that you could say, well, maybe they shouldn't have done that or shouldn't have done this. But when we saw the numbers of people last year, when we were towards the end of the session, my committee was looking at the other program, and we get to talking about the remote worker program, and when the numbers started coming in of how many people had already been signed up, we said, well, why are we, and the money had already been used, that we had allocated $250,000 that year, and by April it was already gone. And so if we have a program that seems to be working, why are we going to wait now until January to apply the other $125,000 and then wait again for the next January to apply the other $125,000? It just made sense to us that we apply the money now when we have momentum. So that's what we in conference committee, we made that proposal, and I couldn't believe it, but they accepted it.
Well, I just want to, as a comeback to that, Representative Marcotte, I just want you to know I gave a floor speech today on S240, which is going to come to your committee, which we now have a waiting list of 75 people on the remote worker program, and this will free up money. So for the same principle, not having to wait 4 more months for a hiatus because of lack of money, that bill will free up the money immediately.
Jamie?
Just as a quick follow-up, we've already said the return on the investment was great because you got $7 million worth of marketing for $500,000, so well done on you for that. But my guess is, just from my background in economic development, we've also got 400 people that have come here that will be taxpayers in the state of Vermont. And my guess is that those 400 people will end up paying more in taxes than you paid out to them many times fold. Have we had the opportunity to do that analysis?
Yes. Yeah, we did an analysis and we reported on the floor that the people who are coming are higher income than the average Vermonter. They're involved, a lot of them are involved in IT for the remote worker program. And the analysis that was done by the agency showed that average person would be paying more than $4,000 in taxes in 1 year, and the average grant was only $3,800. But they hopefully will be here for many, many years.
Well, and another aspect to that is, we brought in about 400 people, but that doesn't take into account the people that came with them. And so hopefully a lot of them are here and working also, their partners. And so we're getting kind of double, you know, almost double what we would expect. So, and those people that are working, they're contributing to the Vermont economy as well.
Is anybody having trouble finding a particular kind of worker? Daphne, you don't have to answer that question, you
Yeah,
can
no,
ask the one
yeah,
you want.
so I just wanted to follow up on the